So we are here in the Basilica de San Pedro, very near the Basilica San Pedro, where the conclave is being done right now. In fact, they started the evening part of the conclave of today, which is the second day, at 4. So when we were starting our meeting, and they have been less than 24 hours. But maybe today or tomorrow, it can be today, it can be tomorrow, it can even last 1 week, because there are 133 cardinals this year. Is the year where more cardinals are, well, they need to decide. 2/3 of them need to decide. Well, for a number of reasons, I am also anthropologist, a part of psychology, so I decided to come to see what was going on during the funeral, and then decided to stay, and I decided to start doing these interviews. So also I needed to ask for a accreditation. So it was amazing that they give me for my institute an accreditation, taking into account the themes I cover. But I just explained them. I was covering it from the psychology and spirituality connection, like covering from this perspective. No? So finally, because you are the fourth interview, this has been, as you know, totally improvised, because basically we decided after the Pope died, so it's been the last 10 days that we have been planning this. There are going to be other interviews also during the next days, at least until the Fumata Blanca, but also then it's going to be another, as the funeral is going to be inauguration a few days after the Fumata Blanca. So probably we are going to stay maybe until the 11th, also to have the occasion to invite more people, because in fact a lot of people wanted to show up, but they are finding the spot in their agendas as you. So well, this is the context. Finally, the name we have put to the symposium is Symposium on Psychology, Spirituality, Mystical Experiences, and Mental Health. Although we are covering other themes, well, we didn't put psychedelics in the title for evident reasons, because we are in the Vatican, so we don't want to push things very far. But we are having also a lot of conversations surrounding psychedelics, and well, you know why, and we are going to talk about this precisely as part of our interview. And also, well, I put this title, no, like psychedelics, mystical experience, and experiential medicine, has a title of what we are going to talk about. And so thank you, Brian Richards, for being here. So if you want, first of all, I'm going to talk, you're going to talk more now for the rest of the interview, but your background, what is your background? How you became interested in this field of psychedelic psychotherapy?
Thank you. Brian Richards, I'm trained as a clinical psychologist in the United States. My father is Bill Richards, who is a legacy contributor to some of the original research at Spring Grove many, many years ago. Back in 2020 and 2021, Roland Griffiths and his team at Johns Hopkins Behavioral Pharmacology Research Unit wanted to ask the question around psychedelics as a class of medicine and characterize them. So the basic science still needed to be done around the abuse liability, the potential benefits, what are the experiential medicine aspects of these drugs that many people are using recreationally, that some of the earlier research pointed to some really positive signals, meaning with oncology or cancer patients, what is happening in their mind that some of them no longer feared death or needed less pain medicine or re-engaged with their family and lived their lives very fully until the point of death, when they had previously been frozen in fear and very withdrawn. So what's the phenomenon in consciousness that these medicines and intention and meaningful support from a therapist help people in an afternoon going inward with music in a very comfortable space? Just some realization or recollection or remembrance that then is so compelling and so personally meaningful, so noetic to the human being's experience, that discard their fear of death. That's extraordinary. And so those questions, just that it's possible in the life of a human being to feel like they've remembered something, they've reconnected with something, and they don't need to fear death anymore, and they can live their lives fully, though it will come to an end sooner than they would have wished. Extraordinary. And how can we, myself as a healthcare practitioner, help create a safe and supportive therapy envelope that helps occasion those types of experiences for people, in the person as a possibility in the present moment? How can they realize that, and then how can we help them bring those realizations within themselves into their ordinary everyday experience of life?
So in which moment, well, you already mentioned that you are the son of Bill Richards, so you were surrounded by this since your childhood, I guess. So, but in which moment you became involved with the research project, and also to just the background of this also, even though we are not going to focus on that, we are going to focus on that in all the interviews. It was this seminal study on the mystical experience, the God Friday experience experiment in 1963 or 62. I think it was 62, published in 63, which was the first study who really wanted to measure not only the psychotherapeutical part, which you already mentioned. There were a lot of studies, Spring Grove with your father, Stan Grove, and on the group and in other centers, with addiction, oncology patients, and other life-threatening illnesses. But this Good Friday experiment, which, by the way, was held in Harvard University, was the first to try to measure scientifically, and they developed this questionnaire, which you have been also using in Johns Hopkins. The first name was Peak Experience Questionnaire, then Mystical Experience Questionnaire. I think you changed a bit and you named it a State of Consciousness Questionnaire. So they developed this questionnaire based on the research of one lecturer expert in comparative mysticism. So they really were able, in a group context, to prove or scientifically demonstrate that the people who were taking a psychedelic in this group context, which was psilocybin in high doses in this case, has in a very high percentage of the volunteers a mystical experience compared with the control group. So you have been, first of all, replicating this study, as the first study who was held in Johns Hopkins. I don't know if you already participated in this one, but anyways, then, after then, in the other studies also, you were also looking to this particular dimension, because we are in the Vatican, I think this is one of the points. But in which research projects have you been participating in Johns Hopkins first, and then further, than not only in Johns Hopkins, but in other centers?
Very good. Yes, thank you. And you raise a really central point, which is that with these medicines, some of them are naturally occurring, like psilocybin. People can have what are called mystical type experiences. And what does that mean for a human being to have that kind of experience? Of course, it can occur spontaneously with prayer, religious or spiritual practice, sensory deprivation, overload, whatever it may be, holotropic breathing, but resolutely with some degree of frequency, with the right context and intention and a sense of safety, that people can have a mystical experience. And you're right, Iker, that we can measure that scientifically. And so really to emphasize, and I'm paraphrasing Roland Griffiths here, appreciating he was the originator of bringing this back into research as a very profoundly respected specialist researcher in abuse liability and characterizing caffeine, benzodiazepines, and then psychedelics. So really appreciate his courage in bringing to Johns Hopkins the question around this class of medicine. But very importantly, also a really erudite, methodical approach to the science, meaning what is a mystical experience? We can characterize it by some different categories. Maybe I could briefly review them for your audience.
Sure. Yeah.
Should one have a mystical experience, what does that mean? Well, for many people, and there's a series of questionnaires, short and long form, that really help the subjectivity of this experience be conveyed into form with psychometrics. Unitive, the sense of being an aspect of consciousness always, despite our individuality, at the same time, we're a part of the universe, inescapable, seamless, always there, never truly alone or utterly estranged or isolated. And the realization of the unitive experience, for many people, that's part of how they let go of their fear of death. They may have a body, they're more than their body. They may have a mind, but they're more than just their mind, the thoughts in their mind. There's a noetic aspect, and noetic describes knowing it to be fundamentally true, the ultimate nature of reality that they had forgotten or become disconnected from, but it's always been true, it's always there. And isn't that extraordinary? Remembrance or reconnecting with something that is and always has been there. So that is enormously comforting to people as they look towards the inevitability of death coming soon, to remember that. And so that's what some of my patients have told me. That's why they're no longer afraid of death. They remembered something they had forgotten. So very, very profound. Another aspect is the transcendence of time and space, a sense of being beyond, somehow outside of time and space itself, disembodied beyond the physical form as consciousness, exploring the universe and encountering other aspects of sentient beings, what's called intuitive knowledge, kind of noetic aspects, often, and honoring your being exactly where you are in the world, Iker, at this conclave, and the very important question about how we can help people have profoundly meaningful experiences, really across any religious tradition, of sacredness, of reconnecting with something very profound, mystical, beyond the ordinary, and deeply appreciating that what is often subjectively occasioned in people is a deeply felt positive mood, a sense of extraordinary ease, relaxation, inner peace, appreciation of the nature of life. And also these dynamics of what's called ineffability and paradoxicality. We'll try to find words to describe these experiences. People might say, well, there's no words in any language that could possibly convey the depth and the profundity of what I experienced, but I'll try. And they'll often say, well, I somehow died to who I was. That was obliterated, disintegrated, fell away entirely. And there I was as consciousness. So I died, and somehow I've never felt more vibrantly, fully alive in this moment than I can recall. And so the paradoxicality, the unitive inclusion of light and dark, the experience can be very challenging for people. Then they can self-transcend into something more blissful, more extraordinary, inexplicable, through the dark night of the soul, or death, rebirth, resurrection, crucifixion. These are very important themes that for some people are very much a compelling part of their experience. Often with demonstrably Christian or Vedic or other elements, and it can be really across traditions, the manifestation of certain symbols or deities, gods, goddesses, that are encountered in a very visceral way, not as an abstraction, not as something an image in the mind, but a realization of that form, encountering the aspect of God. So really very profound and challenging experiences. And that they exist as a possibility in consciousness within all of us. And that's the really important point. They are potentially very vitally important experiences for a human being to have. Then they're no longer incarcerated by the thoughts in their own mind about the limitations of who they are or their insecurities, their fears. If we think of the experience of life, all of us have to contend with the thoughts in our mind inescapably, exhaustively every single day. What are those fears, insecurities, whatever they may be, repeating? And many people spend a lifetime kind of reacting to those thoughts as if they're real. So we might say that also, if we were to take a more secular perspective, it's very helpful to have a resolutely definitive experience of what we might call mindfulness, meaning completely in the present moment, and capable of observing all the thoughts as they come and go, all the imagery in the mind dispassionately as a phenomena of consciousness, not to identify with it. And so depending on the study volunteer, and now I work at an outpatient practice, Gladstone Psychiatry and Behavioral Health in Maryland in the United States, where we're really looking to bring a safe and effective approach to experiential medicine into U.S. healthcare systems. So this is a context where there are medically trained, properly qualified and supervised, and very importantly, accountable healthcare practitioners who are really disciplined and who can help provide that therapy envelope so that it can be more natural and less effortful for people to have these very profound experiences. One thought, if I may, is as we think about, well, you know, what can we do as healthcare providers to help the person? Go ahead. Able to hear me okay?
Yeah, I
Great.
hear you. There is a 1 second delay only, but it's okay. But can you finish with this thought if you want, and then I want to ask you a question.
Great. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yes, so also for contextualizing, no, because you are going to the present, but it's important to the people who is not aware or familiar with this field that the studies you are talking about, well, they were the studies in the 60s, then it was the almost prohibition of the use of these medicines. You are not going to go to the motives, but this happened. And then when they started again these studies, what that you mentioned, Ronald Richards and your father, and the whole team was 25 years ago in Johns Hopkins.
Yes.
This study about proving or studying specifically if psilocybin high doses, in this case in an individual context, can induce a mystical experience, was published in 2006. So we are talking that it's already classical literature because it's 20 years. So in fact, someone told me recently, no, this is a classical paper. No, it was like, wow, I remember when it was published, but it's already classic. So
Wow.
now we are almost in the moment that after a lot of studies, no, then after this seminal study was published, you start with studies with life-threatening diseases in Johns Hopkins, with nicotine addiction, with depression, and now there are like many different lines, not only in Johns Hopkins, but also in New York University and many other places. So we are almost in the moment in which this medicine in particular, but probably other psychedelic medicines are going to start to be approved as medicines, first in the States, probably later Canada, Switzerland, Australia already approved them, so well with control, but with many rules, but for use them in medical context, but it's almost about to happen. So, I mean, for people who is in my YouTube channel and follow me, which are from Spain, Portugal, and Latin America, for them, when I explain them what you are going to explain now, they can't believe that it's already happening. I mean, they can't believe that things are happening already in the States, no? But before going to that, so we're going to try to put the energy there. But the results of this follow-up just to mention the connection with mental health also, a part of this first study, they happen, these mystical experiences with high doses of psilocybin, but also they have significant value personally and spiritually for the people who participate and have the mystical experience, which was like the 60% or 66% of the volunteers. And also they say that their life satisfaction and well-being was increased also, not only in the short term, but also 14 months later. No? So also just to point out to these two things, no? The connection between the mystical experience and well-being that you have been finding in your studies, no? And then also the release of different psycho-emotional problems, no? And then
and
yeah, so,
if I may, you bring up a really vital point, which is just this mystery of life that a person can have a singular experience in a 6 to 8 hour session on a sunny day, going inward meditatively. Their healthcare professionals, whoever they are, whatever their discipline is, are attending to everything outside of them, continue with the breath, the present moment, go into the eyes of whatever manifests, even if it's monstrous or terrifying. Just be present, be open, be curious. And when that happens, this is a medicine that is metabolized in 24 hours. It's not detectable in urine. So the drug is completely metabolized. And you're right that 14 months later, that person continues to remember and reconnect with the memory of that experience in such a way that it is personally compelling to make different life choices, to quit smoking, to stop drinking, to engage in a much more authentic way with others in their lives, to contribute to the world, to find a sense of connection, meaning, and purpose with all of life, with the birds, the trees around them, that there is consciousness as well, aliveness. They're a part of it. They're included. Always. And then life itself, there can be a sense of greater gratitude and appreciation and ease. Like whatever the challenges might be, I get to be here. I get to do this, whatever it is. And I think that's part of the joy, the lightness of being that exists as a possibility for people. But it's wonderful to see that 14 months later, we haven't given them any drug again. They haven't had any additional specialized therapy. They've often brought into their lives and integrated those experiences that were their own very personal realizations then into their ordinary everyday lives. And that's part of the joy and mystery of life, that is a possibility maybe for all of us to an extent.
wow. Yeah, it's amazing. It's very powerful. Well, and then you also, I mean, even with not a lot of psychotherapeutical support, just a little preparation, a little integration has these lasting effects. But then you start also combining with psychotherapy and seeing what happened, or introducing meditation as part of the protocol. So looking to different like tools or psychotherapeutical like tools or different models to see which one, and this is happening also in other centers, no? Like mindfulness, acceptance as commitment therapy, and many others, no? So you have done also that, and also because you were saying, I know you have studied that, no? In Johns Hopkins, you start studying how the processual behavior increase also, no? You were mentioning that people engage in a different way with the people who surrounding them, or with humanity in general, human beings in general, or maybe the family members or whoever is in surrounding them. So this processual behavior increased after the studies. You have found out. And you mentioned another thing that you haven't studied in Johns Hopkins, but it has been studied in Imperial College, for example, increasing the ecological awareness, taking more care about nature also, because you feel you are part of nature, it's not something that is a part of you, it's part of you, no?
Yes, very importantly, beyond the insular idea of the self is kind of, oh, there's also all of life around me, and I'm a part of it. I'm connected to it, a being with all of life. And so quite naturally, people feel more benevolent, more personally responsible for their actions, can be more caring of life.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. But in the studies in John Hopkins, no?
It broke up a
Usually use processual behavior measures, no?
Absolutely. Yes.
No,
Yeah, we certainly measure those outcomes, and also not just the study volunteer, but also their spouse, significant other, close friend, or neighbor. We ask them for ratings as well to get a sense of whether they have observed any significant change in behavior.
I think no. Yeah, it was freeze for 1 second, but if you can repeat the last sentence, you also measure with the family members and?
That's correct, absolutely. So not just the patient or volunteer self-report, that's important, but also who knows that person, who's close with that person, if their husband, wife, or family member also feels like they've seen some really meaningful change. They're no longer depressed and withdrawn. They're much more actively engaged in life. They've started exercising. I would say anecdotally also, very importantly, after a mystical type experience, for some people, they will return to their meditation, prayer, yoga practice, reading the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, other sacred texts, with an understanding, with a sense of utilizing those methods, those practices to remember and reconnect deeply. And so the same text or the same practice that was once referenced very superficially, the poetic understanding, they reread it and it has far greater depth and meaning. They understand it in a way that they didn't understand it before. And so I'll often...
Yeah. Well, I can put
after Mr.
Yeah, an example of this is...
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, an example of this, because we are here, no? What Jesus Christ says, he says to love each other, no? I don't know how hablamos unos a nosotros in Spanish, but let's love all each other, no? He say that, no? And maybe this is just a sentence, but if you have a mystical experience, you really see that what that means in another level of deepness, no? This is an example, no?
You're absolutely right, Iker. Once you've had that type of experience, it's very, very clear, it's apparent that we're all a part of life. So our actions in the world, everything we express, our words, our movements, whatever we contribute, there's a sense of how that interfaces with consciousness, with other human beings. And very often a much more benevolent, deeply caring sense of the humanity of the other, or the living being of that animal, dog consciousness, for example, or the birds or plants and trees and flowers. And it's really a felt sense of attunement and connection with all of life, that it really is always there. That's the nature of reality. And we often don't see it because we're fear-based in our mind, preoccupied, whatever it may be. So the desire to embody a state in the present moment of greater connectedness, attunement, contributing to the world, that is part of what might characterize a mystical experience for many people. We remember, it's apparent to us, and so then it absolutely makes sense to be truthful, truthful, to be authentic, to be caring to others, to be reciprocal in our interpersonal interactions, not to be greedy, not to lie. The very caveats of every organized religion, it becomes apparent as to why, because we're all one, always. That's the ultimate nature. So quite naturally, it makes sense for us to be caring and benevolent in the world. And so that expression then for each person can happen quite naturally. And then what we hear from their husband, their wife, their brother, their best friend is, wow, you know, he's so much more relaxed and caring.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what happened.
It works. No?
Yeah,
Thank you. So, and now, yes, let's go to the, yeah, let's go to the present, no? To have a little time to really see where we are now, or where we are, you are in the States, but probably you are going to be a model in this particular theme for the rest of the world, no? Not in other themes, but this is other theme. But what
Sure.
is happening, no?
Yeah, so the great question is, how do we make this a totally culturally acceptable option in healthcare systems in the United States, where there's a copay and as any procedure, there's multiple disciplines involved. They're compensated for their work under U.S. healthcare models, and we can provide a safe and effective experience for them. That involves medical screening and what we call an advanced screening, which is the equivalent of lab and comprehensive labs in primary care for psychiatry and behavioral health. So a clinical interview, a very comprehensive series of questionnaires to really get a sense of the human being and how they organize their experience and what the treatment needs to know, and then how they can be most helpful. And also, very importantly, whether or not this particular person who's interested in experiential medicine should take any type of psychedelic, an atypical psychedelic like ketamine. That's what we can use now. Likely 2 to 3 years from now, we'll be able to have as prescribable, cleared by the FDA into healthcare systems, LSD, 5-methoxy, other medicines. Psilocybin will probably be a primary medicine, in part because it's so memorable. There's a depth of experience, and we can also help that experience be deeper for a person with music that follows the PK profile or pharmacokinetic profile of the medicine in terms of blood levels, and other elements of kind of the setting that really can be conducive to a person being able to fully trust and let go, and then go inward and with their breath, with the present moment, have a very profound experience.
So basically, I mean, after doing all these studies, we are arriving to this moment in which this medicine in particular and others, psychedelics, in a few years are going to be legal, and you are focused especially, by the one hand, working in oncology with your father, this project. You can talk a little bit about that if you want. But also, by the other hand, is because one thing is that this is going to be very expensive, no? For someone who wants to do it, it's going to be very expensive. So you are also working in how combines or put these treatments as part of the insurances, no? Private insurances, companies insurances. You are working at this level right now, no? And having results, no? I know there is another project at least in the same directions. Thea, I think is the name. So can you explain us a bit of the two things, no? The focus in the oncological clients, patients, and the focus on making this more available in different ways, no? And one is making it more affordable through the insurances.
Very good. Thank you. So, for example, right now, as of yesterday, I have a new oncology patient who had a colon cancer, a lot of complications, currently is in a state where there's no evidence of disease, but has really suffered and wants to reconnect with her body, with her yoga practice, is obese, really is really quite depressed, and looking for an experience to reconnect. And came to the Baltimore office, one of 5 offices at Gladstone Psychiatry and Behavioral Health. I've evaluated her. She'll see the medical director, and she's committed to a sequence of 6 sessions. We have ketamine available sublingually, but all of this is covered by insurance. Very important. So it's sort of like she could see psychiatry, she could consider TMS, she could consider individual therapy. Oh, and there's also experiential medicine. Sure, that sounds interesting. That sounds safe. It would be more of a meditative experience with this medicine. It's a well-known medicine that has been around for decades. And for many people, it can occasion a very profound expanded state of consciousness. That's really great. And so we're onboarding this new patient now, but it is a series of outpatient procedures covered by insurance. So very importantly, to help it become much more culturally normative, that expanded states can be meaningful, can be a catalyst for personal growth and change or healing, and can be powerfully useful if they're utilized in a safe and effective way. So we're very methodical, but it really is a kind of medical model within which people can have experiences that may be profoundly spiritual. They may not be very spiritual. I've worked with atheists, agnostics, people who are devoutly spiritual or religious, but a human being who is suffering and they're looking for an experience that will help shift, transfigure, in some way change their experience of life in such a way that they can feel life is worthwhile, that they're connected once again to others, and they're living life in a meaningful and purposeful way. And so I'm really grateful to be helping with creating this in the field, because ultimately, if it becomes something that is available nationwide in the United States, available globally in other healthcare systems, that's carefully thought through and structured, is very safe and effective, then expanded states become normative and meaningful potentially for human beings worldwide. And that would be a catalyst for greater change. I do, Iker, I do apologize. I have a meeting now.
It's already 11, but the last question in 1 minute. So,
okay.
And because it's connected with what you are saying, no? What about using psychedelics besides mental health for personal growth and spiritual growth, no? Like in the context of different spiritual traditions and communities. This can be also another avenue, no? Which can be open, no, in the future.
Also, a very important question. Thank you. And back at Johns Hopkins, we did a study of spiritual practice. And so this was psychologically healthy human beings, 75 participants. And this study was really for people who were really quite healthy, but were asking the questions, wanted to have a deeper experience. And so you're absolutely right, Iker. Not just people who are struggling with trauma or depression, but also all of us, human beings who want to go deeper, to have a sense of fathoming some depth in life, this mystery. We don't know where we came from. We don't know where we're going. Here we are now as fellow human beings. What do we do with our lives? What's the meaning of all of this? Isn't it remarkable? But to have a personal felt sense of it being meaningful and purposeful, whatever we're contributing to the world. What you're contributing to the world is extraordinary. You're in Vatican City right now. Amazed. Thank you for bringing this into the world in this way. What a contribution, Iker. And so grateful for you. And I apologize. I've got to run to a meeting right now.
But it's been amazing. We have covered a lot of ground. I think psychedelics connect me with my purpose, so I finish in the right place.
Yeah.
Lots of times.
Well, thank you, Iker. So good to be
Thank
with
you.
you. Bye.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
See you soon.
Very good. Thank
Hope
you.
to have your father also during these
Yes.
days. So talk with him. I will talk with him also.
Very good. Thank you, Iker.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye bye.